Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Today is Thursday, May 20th, 2021. It's the 9th of Sivan. We continue with our discussions about the Torah reading of the week, as well as we've been away we haven't had a lunch break with the Rabbi for a few days, since last Thursday actually, because of the festival of Shavuos. We just want to remind you that we are continuing our JLI course on It Can Happen, which is going to continue this Tuesday night on Zoom and in live person. Now you're more than welcome to join us, especially with the no mask mandate. You're always welcome to join us. So please feel free to join us in person for our class that's going to be Tuesday night. We will continue our Facebook and YouTube live lunch break with the rabbis as often as we can, to be able to include those that still can't make it over and people from around the world. So we are going to discuss today the Torah reading of the week because it's Thursday, coming right before Shabbat. This week's Torah reading is a unique one, as it is the single longest Torah reading of the Torah. It has 176 verses, and it is the single longest Torah reading. It has in it about the 12 tribes dedicating the tabernacle. It has about the laws of the sota, that means a woman who is promiscuous and does not follow the sanctity of marriage. It teaches about the laws of Nazirite. It has in it the laws and discusses the blessings that the Kohanim give the Jewish people, as well as the dedication that one gives to the Holy Temple. Many things discussed in this week's Torah reading, but we'll just talk about a few. First of all, we know if you look just a glimpse in this week's Torah reading, somebody that looks quickly at the Torah reading will see that seemingly it's repetitious. We mentioned many times that the Torah never says anything for extra. There's no additions or not even an extra letter or extra word, how much more so the Torah would not put an extra paragraph or verses. And one of the unique things we find in this week's Torah reading is the fact that the tribes contributing and bringing their dedication and their animals to the Holy Temple, the Torah mentions each one of the tribes, what they brought to the Holy Temple. But it doesn't just mention each one of the tribes of what they brought, but every single one of the tribes, it repeats again. They brought an identical sacrifice, and the Torah still finds it necessary to repeat every single tribe what they brought, even though they were exactly identical. The Torah simply could have just said, these are the tribes, this is what each one of them brought, and that's it. Said it once. Hasidic commentators explain to us that the reason why the Torah needs to repeat every single tribe is not only a lesson for them to tell us about their unique commitment to the Holy Temple and to the dedication of the tabernacle, but also to every single one of us. Because every single one of us is a different and unique individual. And especially coming from a different tribe, we all have a different way how we serve God. And even though we look like we're doing the exact same thing, we are really connecting in a completely different way, which is a very interesting and unique perspective, because you walk into a synagogue, though it look like we all have the exact same prayer book, saying the exact same prayers, but every single person has their way how they connect to God. They used to say there was a fellow, a chassid, he used to pray with the crease in his page, meaning that every single time he davened, he found another prayer that spoke to him, that connected him, that related to him. He found another way of connecting himself with God. There were no two individuals the same. And over here, when the Torah repeats every single one of those tribes, again, repeating what they've done, how they've done it, the Torah is clearly giving us this message that every single one of us, our unique service to God is not to take it for granted. And the Torah appreciates it, recognizes it, and not only that, welcomes our unique contribution of what we have. That set in mind, what causes us to go astray? What causes somebody to do something wrong? And when the Torah talks about the prohibition or the commandment pertaining to a sota discusses a woman who, after being warned, goes and acts promiscuously. However, there are no witnesses to identify what's going on. She is then brought in front of God. She drinks a special potion, which in fact God's name is erased. The holy divine name is erased in the potion to truly identify if she has done something and committed a sin. Now, God says, allow my name to be erased, even though, as we learned in the Ten Commandments, one is not allowed to say God's name in vain. only to bring peace between a husband and wife. That's how valuable the commitment of the peace between a husband and wife is important. But over here, the Torah uses a unique terminology when it talks about a woman who goes astray. It says, if a woman has a spirit of nonsense that comes into her, overcomes her. And our sages explain, what does this mean, a spirit of nonsense? And over here, it's really defining the relationship that the Jews have with God. As you know, on the giving of the Torah on Shavuos that we just celebrated on Monday and Tuesday, we celebrated the time when God gave the Jewish people the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments was the marital contract that we, the Jewish people, have with God. The Torah is the contract that we have with God. The Jewish people are like the bride. God is our groom. And over here, God says, I wed the Jewish people, as the Medrash says, what is the day of God's wedding is the day that God gave us the Torah. So what causes us to sometimes go astray, not follow? We want to be committed. We want to follow. A Jew inherently has a soul that loves and wants to be connected with God. So what would cause a Yid? What would cause a Jew to, God forbid, go astray? The verse tells us in this week's Torah reading, he is overcome by a spirit of nonsense. This is not truly who the Jew is. A Jew is truly connected to his source, is truly connected to who he is, inherently has a soul, a pinta le'id, as they say in Yiddish. He has a spark of God in him that can never be extinguished. But sometimes he gets into this nonsense. He gets into a haze. He doesn't realize what's going on, overcomes him, and does something wrong. And therefore, God forbid, ex-promiscuous, values other things other than God in that relationship. But when we talk about a relationship, there's another thing that is told in this week's Torah reading, talking about the ability and the obligation that a Jew, after he finishes working really hard in his field, sowing, harvesting, he has to then take his first fruit and bring it to the Holy Temple. Once he comes to the Holy Temple, he then brings it to the altar, gives it to the Kohen. With that, he says a confession and takes his first and best of fruit and gives it to God. The Torah uses a terminology that he must bring it to God. Bring it to the house of God, instead of saying, give it to the Kohen. The Torah over here is telling us something very unique that this mitzvah is teaching us. The evil inclination, the spirit of nonsense, is sometimes very powerful and can convince and confuse us that what we worked hard on, I sowed, I harvested, I plowed, it should belong to me. My best and my brightest should be mine. Why am I giving it to God? The creme de la creme, that should be on my dining room table. Over here, God comes along and says, no. Where do you show your dependence on God? Where do you show that you recognize the blessing of God? Is when you take your prime, your first fruit, and it is brought to the house of God. What does it mean it is brought? It comes. It is a natural occurrence that you recognize the dependence on God. That you recognize that though you were the messenger, though that God has chosen you gratefully to be the one to sow, to plow, to harvest, but now he has chosen you also to show that beauty, to show your acceptance, acknowledgement, and favor. Recognize the good that God has done to you and bring your first fruit to the Holy Temple. The same is true today in our work, in our day-to-day life. We go to work, we work hard to earn, to live, to prosper. Sometimes we make a little more, sometimes we make a little less. What is the first thing we must remember? Recognize and know the source of where the blessing is coming from. Achievement does not come on its own. It comes with the blessing of God. And we always have to be cognizant and recognize that that blessing is of God. His dependence is what makes us successful. How do we recognize it? Is by the first thing we do is taking a little bit of what we earned and giving it to God. Not finding the jalopy and donating it to God, But from the creme de la creme, the best of our crop, we're going to donate to God. The best of our energy. That's why the first thing we do when we wake up in the morning is we pray. We take our first prime good energy and we don't spend it on nonsense, but we spend it on dedicating and praying to God. And only afterwards do we go on to work and use the rest of the day. As the prophet says, Yegia kapecha kiseicha lashrecha. It is the work of my palms that I eat from, because my head, my brain, I is always dedicated, is connected to God. The work that I have, the activity that I make, that's from my palms, is secondary. We always have to remember the primary objective is to acknowledge the greatness and be thankful for what God has given us and the blessings of our life. And the way we do that is by dedicating the first part of our day, our best energies, or our best of money, our profits, and giving it to God, to charity, recognizing and acknowledging, appreciating and being thankful for what God has given us. When we show our dependence on God, God is reciprocates in kind, showing his kindness to us as well, giving us what we need for a prosperous, healthy, good year. My dear friends, I want to take this opportunity to wish you a good Shabbos, a healthy Shabbos, and may we learn from this Torah reading to always be thankful, always be grateful, recognize when good is done for us. And as we know in Judaism, Hakaras HaTov, appreciation and recognition for kindness, is paramount in our Jewish belief. God has done it, and he expects us to do the same. Let us all be grateful to God. Let us be grateful to one another when kindness is done, making this world a better place for all. Good Shabbos. God bless you. See you on Monday. Lunch break with the Rabbi at 1 p.m.